Hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of SacTown Movie Buffs. Once again, I'm Kier, and this is Jason. And today we are back again with a review of two new movies that we found streaming online. The first being The Sound of Metal, and the second being Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. I know Ma Rainey's Black Bottom was on Netflix, and The Sound of Metal was on, where did you find that one?
It's Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime.
Yeah, and Amazon Prime. Perfect.
Yeah.
So kind of a different pairing of films, but most about both, well, not too bad. They're both kind of music related films. So, mostly anyways. So I'm going to have you go ahead and kick it off. So I say we get right into it. We're going to go ahead and start off with the first review, which is going to be The Sound of Metal. So if you want to tell us a little bit about that one, Jason, please.
Well, first of all, it's not The Sound of Metal here. It's just Sound of Metal. So, it's very important that you not mess that up. But no.
Yeah, that's really important.
The Sound of Metal is about a drummer played by Riz Ahmed, who is a very good actor. I've seen him in several other performances, especially an HBO miniseries called The Night Of, which was really good. I think he's one of the best young actors there are these days, and I think it's one of the best performances I've seen all year here for sure. But he plays a drummer in a rock band who loses his hearing, and it comes as quite a shock to him, and he has to kind of adjust to life as someone who's deaf. And not only that, but he is a drug addict also, trying to maintain his sobriety. So when he loses his hearing, his girlfriend, played by Olivia Cook, who is also one of my favorite young actors, she gets him checked into a rehab clinic specifically for deaf people. And I thought that was really interesting because you hardly ever see deaf people portrayed in movies, period. But when you do, it's you don't really see this side of it. You don't really see them as regular people. You see them as just, they're deaf, and that's their only real trait in the movie, if you see them at all. But here it was like, it was actually a rehab clinic for deaf people, which I didn't even think about there being a place like that. And also they cast actual, these are the people that you see in the movie are actually deaf, and you can tell, you can't. There's some things you can't act. You can just tell that they, these are actual deaf actors, and I thought that was really interesting too. But basically, he has to, number one, maintain his sobriety, and number two, adjust to being deaf, and number three, decide whether he wants to go the route of getting a cochlear implant. And I've actually seen a documentary a few years ago called, I can't remember the name of the documentary, but the documentary about the debate within the deaf community about whether about the cochlear implant, and a lot of deaf people actually see that as kind of a betrayal in a way to get the cochlear implant because it's, I don't know, it's kind of hard to put into words, and I haven't seen the documentary in a few years, but it's definitely a point of debate about whether you should just be deaf and accept that you're deaf and not look at it as a handicap, or get the surgical implant put in your brain that is kind of sort of like hearing again, but not really. So basically he has to decide those things, whether he's going to adapt to being deaf, whether he's going to maintain his sobriety, and or whether he's going to get the cochlear implant. And I thought it was a really good movie. I think it's one of the best performances I've seen of the year. It showed me a whole side of life that I didn't even think about. I lost my train of thought, but it's just a really well-acted, well-directed film that made me look at a side of life that I hadn't really considered before. So yeah, I gave it a big thumbs up. How about you, Kier?
Going into it, I wasn't quite sure because I'm not a big fan of heavy metal music, so I was a little thrown off because it was a lot of heavy metal at the very beginning. When he's playing on tour and he's beating drums, and his girlfriend is the singer, and she's basically screaming into a mic, and so that's kind of a little jarring at first. But fortunately, the rest of the movie, there's really no more of that heavy metal music, so that made it a little bit more tolerable for those that aren't into that kind of stuff. Which definitely not a fan of that. I remember watching it with my fiance, and we had to turn the volume down because it was like so piercing to our ears. But yeah, I thought his acting was good. I thought he did a great job. I wasn't really familiar with him prior to the film, him or the female lead. I didn't really know either one of them, but definitely it was an interesting story. It definitely gave you kind of a take, like you said, the deaf community and that kind of stuff. And I had a little bit of dealings personally with the deaf community just from college days, because I actually did 2 semesters of ASL or sign language, and we actually had to part of our task or assignments was we actually had to go and basically go sit down. They're like, even here in Sacramento, there's a huge deaf community where they meet at like coffee shops and things of that nature, and we got to sit down with them, and you couldn't talk when you were sitting down with them. So it was kind of interesting, because that's kind of how he was when he first sat down with the people in the deaf community, and they were all using sign language and none of them were talking, and he was kind of lost for the first, I'm sure, while, because he didn't understand what they were talking about, but he seemed like he picked it up pretty quickly, obviously. Yeah, it's an interesting tale. Definitely, like I said, just, my brief experience, which, was almost 20 years now, of course, since we were in college, but just my brief experience of interacting with the deaf community and learning about their way of life and how they communicate and that sort of stuff. And I just can't imagine, hearing and then all of a sudden not being able to hear and then having to learn. Basically, it's akin to learning a new language. You know what I mean? It's like, basically, moving to Russia or Mexico or something of that nature, and nobody else speaks English, and, or maybe the one person that could still talk. No one else really, speaks your language. So you have to basically sign everything if you want to communicate with them. And so I thought that was interesting. And then obviously the debate about whether or not you get the implants or not, I thought that was interesting as well. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film. I don't know if it was my tops of the year. I haven't really looked at all that just yet, but I definitely thought it was a good film. I thought it was well acted. I definitely thought it was interesting. I definitely think that most people will get some enjoyment out of it for sure. And like I said, it is kind of fascinating just to see, like, he works in a field where he has to be able to hear, you know what I mean? So that's the kind of the drawback. It's like, well, if you're in a band, you got to be able to hear what your other bandmates are playing or what they're singing and that kind of stuff. And, clearly, a lot of the people in the deaf community can read lips. But if you're in a band, you're the drummer, you're in the back, how are you going to be able to read lips to see what part you're supposed to be on, or you don't even know if you're off or not. You don't know if you're off beat or anything like that. So that, it just so happens that, he was in a field where hearing is important, so what does he do in that case? Does he go back to playing music? Because it seems like that's pretty much his only, real skill that you could tell it initially was that he could play music. And then, or does he find something different? So I thought that was kind of interesting. I like the take of it. Not going to go too much into, how the film unfolds or what decision he makes and kind of going from there. But overall, yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought it was a good film. I thought it was well acted. Like I said, definitely one of the better films I've seen of the year. Obviously, I know that you had told me that it seems like it's getting a lot of Oscar buzz, and I think that he potentially his acting was good enough to where he might get some acclaim. I don't know if it's the best acting performance of the year, and I'll get into that in the next film. But definitely it was a great job on that as well. So cool.
Yeah. So I am a big metal fan. You're not a metal fan, but we both enjoyed the movie. So
yes, good. I think it's also partially that the metal portion of the movie was only in like the first 15 minutes or so at the beginning. So, after that, there was really no more metal. It was just pretty much him beating on drums and that sort of stuff. So, but yeah, definitely. No, it was interesting. It was an interesting take for sure. So yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. Like I said, you don't have to necessarily be a fan of metal to enjoy the film, because it's not like they're playing heavy metal music throughout the entire film. So, but yeah. Cool.
Yeah, and not to nitpick, but they didn't sound much like a metal band to me either. It was more like a hardcore. They sounded more like a hardcore band just so you know.
Yeah. I mean, they didn't sound akin to like Metallica or something like that. They were more like, it was more like that growling sound that I can't stand, where it's just like, why? You know what I mean? Why? So that kind of stuff just turns me off immediately. So yeah, so like I said, I could probably listen to some quote unquote the more mainstream metal, I guess, if you will. It's not my genre per se, but I could listen to it for the most part if I had to or was forced to. But that stuff I would have to turn off probably immediately. I'd be like, can we play something different?
Understood.
Yeah, he might have he can continue his career. If he continues his career in music, definitely, he might want to, tweak it a little bit. But and then there's also kind of an interesting with the female lead in the film as well. There's also kind of interesting paradox because she's pretty much in the beginning, and then she gets him into like the rehab deaf clinic or whatever, and then kind of when they meet up again, it's almost like she's a completely different person, which I didn't quite expect either. So that was kind of interesting. Also, I thought that dynamic was interesting as well. So definitely want to check out. Like I said, not going to go into details on that, but definitely want to check out. Like I said, definitely one of the better films probably of the year, or at least the acting performances was one of the better acting performances of the year. But I definitely enjoyed it. So cool. Anything else you want to add about Sound of Metal without the?
Yeah, no, you got it.
Perfect. All right. Well, I will move on to the next film, which is going to be Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. So Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, it's really almost more of a play, if anything. I think that's probably the best way to describe it. So basically, it's based on a real person, I guess. I was never familiar with Ma Rainey, who was, I guess, back in the 1940s, was it? 1920s. I'm sorry, 1920s. So she was kind of a Southern singer that kind of sang about, obviously you think black bottom, black butts, stuff like that. She sang kind of like a sexualized, for that time period, it was very racy and kind of sexualized singing. And she, started off in the South, and I guess, over the years got more popular and more fame, and had a band with her and kind of went on the road and did tours and that kind of stuff. And Ma Rainey in this case is played by Viola Davis, who I thought who did an excellent job in that film as playing Ma Rainey. So that's kind of like the first maybe 10-15 minutes of the film. The film then takes a turn to basically they are there's a recording studio in Chicago where they're basically her and her bandmates are kind of sent there to go cut basically a record for this recording studio. And it sounds like she was basically had worked with the studio for quite some time. And it was kind of interesting because, even in Chicago, racism was still probably pretty prevalent at that time because it was the 1920s. But she was like this really like just outspoken, didn't take no stuff from nobody. There's a scene where they're pulling in and her nephew is driving the car and he gets into like a car accident, and people were immediately blaming him, and the cop was kind of getting in their faces, and she didn't care. She was just like, look, it wasn't our fault, yada yada yada. And you know what I mean, she just talked to like the these white police officers kind of any kind of way, as well as the recording studio people any kind of way. She kind of acted like she was kind of like above them, which was really rare to see in the 1920s because all my depictions of somebody of African American descent back in those times, this is not too far removed from slavery, so all of my depictions of somebody from the 1920s, I was like, oh really? She's just kind of talking to like these white officers and white recording studios just any kind of way, but it was also because I guess at that time she was kind of the biggest star for that recording studio at that time. So and so then basically that's kind of where it goes into the play part. So the rest of the film is basically set inside the recording studio, basically in the basement. And it's kind of like two different halves. It's kind of like Ma Rainey, and then her bandmates is basically the other half. So it's made up of about 4 or 5 guys that are down in the recording studio that are male, all African American bandmates, basically varying in age, and also is one of the what does he play? The trumpet, Chadwick Boseman's. It's his last role as well. And so he is basically kind of the troublemaker of the group, if you will. Even on stage, he was been known to kind of like outstep his because he's an excellent trumpet player. So he's been known, even while she was singing on stage, to kind of step up on stage and start playing his trumpet, doing a little bit extra, I guess, if you will, probably to the disdain of Ma Rainey, because she is definitely the star of the show. And he is in the basement, basically. There's a song, Black Bottom, where he kind of like wrote his own version of that song, and he's telling basically the bandmates that we're going to be playing this version of the song, and he's already got approval from the record company, and and they were all basically, well, I don't think Ma Rainey's going to go for that, and whatever she says, that's what goes. And he's just like, well, it don't matter what she says goes. I was told by the record company that that's what's going to happen. And so there's this conflict that takes place from that. There's also a lot of really good stories, a lot of really good dialogue that they share with one another. And like I said, he's kind of the younger guy of the group. They're all a little bit older. They've been doing it for a little bit longer. He's the newest bandmate. And so there's a lot of conflict and struggle between him and the other bandmates. And as they're trying to like practice these songs and telling stories. And like I said, it kind of comes off as a play because most of the setting is between these guys, the bandmates, talking and sharing stories about their lives and things of that nature, and conflicts that they're having kind of with each other. And you can kind of get the sense that the other bandmates aren't too keen on Chadwick Boseman's character because he's a little flashy, a little flamboyant, and he thinks that, he's kind of like maybe partially too good for that band, or thinks that he's going to at some point go off and make his own band and make his own records. And so that's kind of where the story unfolds from there. And I'm kind of going to leave it at that without getting too much into details, because like I said, there's a lot of different things that happen, a lot of things a lot of different conflicts that happen throughout the movie. But I thought it was excellent. I really did enjoy it. I thought it was a great film. I thought that, Chadwick Boseman's always been a great actor. I mean, he's probably more prominently known as Black Panther, obviously. But his acting has always been really good. Even if you didn't love the movie, like, Get On Up or some of the other movies that he was in that weren't necessarily the best movie, he was always the bright star of those films. And I think that between him and Viola Davis, I think they both did a phenomenal job. And and I thought his acting was great. I think it was one of his best roles, if not his best role that I've seen him in. And I thought that he definitely brought his A game for this role. And then I also thought Viola Davis did a phenomenal job as well. And I would be really surprised. I don't know about him, but I would be really surprised if she doesn't get nominated for an Oscar as well for her role as Ma Rainey. So just my take. What did you think about it, Jason?
Oh yeah, I loved it. I watched it just today, and it really kind of blew me away. And I expected to like it, but I don't know if I expected to like it as much as I did. But yeah, it made me want. I tend to people a lot of times use as a negative describing a movie as stagey. You know what I mean? Especially ones that are based on plays. I don't mind that. I always kind of like movies that are based on plays that actually feel like a play. And it is. I mean, except for like a couple of like inserts and flashbacks and a couple scenes out on like the street, like you said, the whole, you can see how it would be done as a play because it's mostly 2 rooms, like the recording studio and the rehearsal room. And it's all one day, one day what happens. And I love that kind of stuff. And the dialogue is amazing. You're definitely right that Viola Davis is great. But I think Chadwick Boseman, he's actually the lead character, if you ask me.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's a lead character. And like I said, I didn't want to say it, but I know that, we were talking about the previous film of him getting, I don't know if you would nominate Chadwick Boseman as a best supporting actor or a best actor because he's almost the lead of the film, you know what I mean? Because there's probably more scenes and dialogue with him than there is with Viola Davis as a whole, even though the movie is more about her character. That's why I didn't want to say, but I thought his acting was phenomenal in there. So just my take. So
Oh yeah, yeah. He gets a couple of monologues that are just like amazing, you know.
Yeah.
And it's really good. I love that. You know, what I've heard is that Denzel Washington is planning 3 of these August Wilson adaptations. I mean, of course, he did Fences in 2016, and then this one, and then I think he wants to adapt The Piano Lesson next, which I've seen a different version of The Piano Lesson back in the 90s, I think, that starred Charles S. Dutton. That was really good.
And Fences was basically a play as well. So.
Oh yeah, they're all 3 of them are August Wilson plays.
Yeah.
And you know, Fences. I like this more than Fences.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I think I did
like
too.
Fences.
I like Fences as well, but I think I like this one better. So.
Yeah, I think Fences. It had. I guess it felt a little bit more like a movie, but I thought like this one just was more engaging. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I like Fences a lot. But yeah, it was really good, and yeah, it inspired me. I guess, you know, one of the highest compliments you could give it is that it inspired me to go to Amazon and get some Ma Rainey and some Bessie Smith, which I'd always heard of both of them, but I never actually had any of their music. But yeah, so yeah, I really enjoyed it. Big thumbs up for sure.
Agreed. Yeah. So two really, really good films about you know, basically musicians or music. So yeah, definitely different walks, because like I said, this one was more of a play, whereas Sound of Metal was more of a actual movie. But definitely you know, two films basically about, you know, musicians. So great pairing. So well, with that said, oops. I hate when I do that. Let's get into those reviews. So I'm gonna have you go ahead and start. So we'll start with Sound of Metal. Overall grade you would give that one, and the face you would give it.
Oh yeah, I thought it was really, really excellent. I give it a 4.5 out of 5, which is an A-, which is big happy face. I enjoyed it.
Cool. Yeah, I enjoyed it quite a bit as well. Definitely more than I thought I would. I went ahead with a 3.5 out of 5, which is, you know, pretty high regards for me. So that's going to be a smile with some teeth. So. No, definitely a really, really good one. Definitely enjoyable one. So I was teetering between giving it a 3 and a 3.5, but I ultimately decided on a 3.5. So. Cool. And then the second film, which is Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Overall grade you would give that one, and the face you would give that one.
I give that 5 out of 5. I don't think it did anything wrong. You know, you could argue that it's stagey, but I would argue that it doesn't intend to not be stagey. You know, it's a stage play. So, but it still makes it enjoyable as a movie too. So I give it 5 out of 5, which is an A, which is same face. You know, thoroughly enjoyed it.
Definitely. Yeah, I like this one a lot. So I went ahead. I gave this one actually a 4 out of 5. So which is a pretty high regard for me. I don't give too many 4.5s or 5s. I barely ever get 4.5s. I normally either 4 or 5. So it's either right there or perfect for me. Just my personal grading. Yeah, but I always feel like when I get 4.5s, I'm a little nitpicky. So I give it 4 out of 5, which I thought was great. Your comment about it being a little stagey, I hate to knock it for that, but there are certain instances where it does feel maybe a little stagey. It didn't bother me per se, but definitely something that I don't know. Maybe if I'm being a little picky, I guess that would probably be it. But definitely loved it. It's definitely, I think it's going to be a top 10 contender for me for sure. So I'm giving it 4 out of 5, and I'm going to give it this face, which is a big smile. So I don't think I got to do that very much at all during this quarantine or movie reviewing. So yeah, no, definitely great. Like I said, definitely one of the better films I've seen this year. So, or for 2020, I guess I should say. I keep saying this year, but we're already in 2021. But yeah.
Well, I mean, it's a 2020 movie.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. You know, but yeah, definitely two really, really good movies. Great choices. And yeah, definitely looking forward to see, there's a few more movies from 2020 I need to see before I can fully wrap up my 2020 review, but I'm already starting to think about my list at this point now. So, because there's not too many more that I need to get to. But yeah, so I'm definitely excited to see what 2021 has in store for us. So, to see how that goes. Anything else you wanted to add about either one of those films?
Nope.
Well, great. Well, as always, we thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Let us know down in the comments your thoughts, your take. Whether did you like both of those films? Have you seen both of them? Let us know in the comments. Obviously, if you like the channel, we ask that you give us a big like, thumbs up. And then, as always, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and then make sure you hit the bell notification as well, so you don't miss even our updates. And we will be back again with another show for you guys again real soon. We thank you for watching and hope you have a great day. Bye.